I'm Eileen Conn and I live in Peckham. I've lived here for over 40 years and I've been very active in the community in one way or another during that time. I've been particularly active in the last 15 years or so on development issues arising in Peckham Town Centre. And Peckham Town Centre is full of wonderful buildings from the 17th century all the way up to today. And I myself experience it as a living museum. And one of the things that we started to say a few years ago was, look up in Peckham. And that was because you see the wealth of history in Peckham buildings when you lift your eyes from scurrying along the street and look up and you see the most amazing buildings that have come down to us over the centuries from the past. And in the last 15 years or so, I've taken a particular interest for a number of planning reasons in what's happening in Peckham Town Centre. And out of the work that we did in 2005, investigating what the council's plans were for a very large site in the middle of the Peckham Town Centre, we had a campaign to get that reviewed because it didn't seem to be very sensible to close it off for a new development which was basically a tram depot.
My name's Claire Hegarty. I'm an architect, and since 2016 I've chaired the Peckham Heritage Regeneration Partnership. I come from an architectural background and I am an architect, but I find myself quite critical of the architectural profession and what it produces in terms of the changes that are taking place, particularly in London at this moment. I feel like architects are simultaneously powerless and powerful. They're very powerful in that they have potentially the ability to kind of negotiate creatively spaces between lots of different groups of people and articulate things that are really important and need to be expressed, but also that they are powerless in that they get pushed about by developers and clients, and that I feel like it's really important that architects find ways of responding to the real crisis and needs, and how the architecture can be rich and full of ideas and experiences, and it's not just a kind of very, very commodified, banal, mechanistic way of creating spaces which can be traded for profit.
So we had a campaign, and out of that campaign, which started in 2005, grew something that was called Peckham Vision. And then we got involved in the Peckham multi-story campaign to try to get that properly reviewed as well. And so over the years, what was started off as an informal small group of people became an ongoing process of alerting people to what was happening in Peckham Town Centre. During the process of that, we realised how significant Peckham Town Centre was in terms of the history scattered throughout the town centre over the centuries from the 17th century, and I got very excited about that. That was when we devised this badge which says look up in Peckham, because we realised that most people, including ourselves, before we started looking up in Peckham, we didn't realise how wonderful the buildings were, some of the buildings, and the variety of them, because they were covered in 20th century, not very good shop fronts, but they didn't do anything to the amazing architecture that was behind, which was just dirty and grimy. And that was when we discovered something called the Townscape Heritage Initiative, and thought that we ought to draw attention in a more effective way to the wonderful history of buildings in Peckham Town Centre.
I'm very pleased that the Peckham Heritage Regeneration Partnership are working alongside Peckham Vision on this project to develop a community-based local list in Peckham and Southwark. And one of the real core driving ideas for me is this idea that architecture and the built environment and the sort of physical world that we live in is full of ideas and has got the potential to reveal ideas about human culture, human interaction, and reveal beauties and stories that are sometimes hidden.
And so we took the initiative and wrote to the Heritage Lottery Fund and said we thought that Peckham Town Centre was a very good candidate for a Townscape Heritage Initiative, and would they be willing to consider it if we encouraged the council to get involved. And they said yes they would, and so we encouraged the council to get involved, and that's how the Townscape Heritage Initiative arose. And that was an exciting development because it showed, and we had all the time through our campaigns being focused on the potential of Peckham Town Centre. It wasn't just opposition to something, but we could see all kinds of potential that the council's plans ignored.
Another idea that really drives me is an idea that architecture has the potential to create meaning and beauty, but I feel like beauty and richness should be available to everyone. They are not luxuries that should just be available to people who can afford it. And so this idea has really driven my enthusiasm for a local list in Peckham and Southwark.
So the importance of the local list is that unlike the other listed buildings, list grade 1 and grade 2, and I think grade 1 starred, they're about national approval of the buildings of national importance. The local list is a procedure which enables the local council to approve buildings for the local list. It has different rules and it has different levels of protection, but it is a very important addition to helping to protect buildings and places locally that people care about.
Because I feel in Peckham, which I now have come to know quite well, there are all these intricate, rich layers of buildings from the 17th century to the 21st century. Some of them are very everyday and they're just very modest, very low-key, but they have a real richness and they make a contribution to the sense of place.
But for us, we see the local list as having an incredible facility for encouraging people to learn about the planning system through the local listing, and for how they can really make a contribution from things that they care about.
Some of the buildings are big, high status, landmark buildings. A lot of the buildings are neglected.
And it's in Southwark, this council were not inclined to have a local list. They didn't think it was worth it. And it was a community campaign in 2018 across the borough with a number of groups that care about the historic and the heritage of Southwark. We got together and we persuaded the council to say yes, they would change that policy and they would adopt a local list. In the meantime, we want to take an initiative which encourages people all over the borough to identify buildings and places that they think are of such importance locally that they should be considered for the local list.
And it beggars belief that these buildings have no protection whatsoever, that they are there waiting to be changed, plundered, destroyed. And I feel that the development of a local list is a way of saying, looking at what we have here, engaging with people and inviting people and encouraging people to tell us what they know about these buildings and what they think about them, and to tap into the stories and the experiences that are embedded in these spaces and buildings around us.
And the Townscape Heritage Initiative was really another example of what happens when local people find ways to speak in such a way it can affect what happens. We proved that in terms of the planning process, in terms of the council's development plans. Now we were proving it in terms of the Townscape Heritage Initiative, which all of these things need the council in a constructive involvement, but none of it would have happened in Peckham Town Centre without local people becoming involved in an informed way to have an effect on the way things work.